2 days.
Cool.
So I did. So that all that said to have the excuse of I was going to watch the video to prep and I didn't have time to do it. So if you could, do you want to catch people up to who you are, I guess what that video was about, and then we could
Yeah,
have a chat. Yeah.
sure. I don't walk around calling people like you have Trump derangement syndrome, you have Trump derangement syndrome. That video was there was another guy at the Free Press where I have a show who is a self-described Trump derangement syndrome haver.
Mm-hmm.
So he wouldn't say like you, I'm a hater of Trump. He comes out and says, I have Trump derangement syndrome. So he was going to write a piece about it. And so they invited me to have him on the show to try to sort of help him through it. And so we did a kind of like, we started it with a kind of funny opening, there's a disease afflicting many of our fellow Americans, blah, blah, blah. But it was a joke. I mean, I obviously think there are many legitimate reasons not to like Trump. I respect many of them. I don't respect all of them. But I would never say to somebody like, I think you're deranged for not liking this person, not voting for this person. The video was my attempt to sort of make him feel a little bit better, to sort of say like, well, given everything that I think you believe, here are the sort of 3 objections people seem to have to Trump. And here would be my way of addressing those sort of 3 objections. And so we went through them one by one. And at the end, he was like, well, I still hate him, but I do feel a little bit better. And I think that was sort of my goal was, to explain to him something that I think is very mysterious to people who truly hate Trump, who don't have people in their lives who really like him, which is how could so many people like this person so much? So, and I think that, for people who truly love this country, that I think you do, people who are true patriots, like people want to understand how the other side sees things. Like I encounter that a lot as well on the right. Like people want to understand their fellow Americans. I think it's only the people in the elites who make money off of division and divisiveness who really don't want to understand. They want to believe that everybody on the other side is either a racist or, a groomer, right? Or whatever it is. But I think average people, like, really want to understand how their fellow Americans think. And when they get a reasonable explanation for why millions of people disagree with them on an issue, it actually is like, you do feel a relief. Like you feel like, oh, that's what it's about. So that's what the video was about. And I don't think I convinced him about anything, but I think I did make him feel a little bit better.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Man. Okay. So, well, where to go from here? How much time do you have?
Is that not what you were expecting? Why did you invite me? I should ask. Like, well, I know
well,
why.
Now I wish I would have watched the video. So I personally, I think that Trump and the movement that he represents is an existential threat to the United States and the stability of our democracy. I think that content creators that have been involved in supporting him, I think are, if they're not criminals, they're as close to that line as possible. I think that there's been an unprecedented wave of hateful anti-American rhetoric, anti-patriotic rhetoric, self-destructive rhetoric that has come from Trump and then his allies and then that side in an unprecedented way that isn't even close to mirrored on the other side. So obviously a lot of conservatives that I argue with would call me a deranged Trump hater. But then when I try to get into the weeds on any of these particular factors, they can rehearse. They have like a few rehearsed Trump talking points, and then they just completely and immediately fall apart, and it's very, very, very frustrating to me. So that question that you also, I rebel a lot. If I ever say anything, you want to cut me off immediately, say something. The thing that you mentioned for the guy, or the thing that you mentioned about wanting to understand the other side, or figuring out like, well, what is it? What's driving the difference between both people? Just as a real quick thing, my mom is from Cuba. And my dad is from Kentucky. I grew up very conservative, very Republican. So if you ask me like, well, what does a conservative or a Republican think? I think I can tell you pretty easily like where the feelings and the beliefs and the opinions and everything come from, especially around moral issues like pro-life and anti-gay marriage. I understand that very well. I went to a Catholic school for up through high school. For the current iteration of this like post-Tea Party MAGA movement, my answer is it exclusively almost is powered by conservative disinformation. And I think it's destroying the country. I think the movement is unsalvageable, and I think that we're like on a path to destruction if we keep pretending that both sides are even remotely the same on this issue. And then, yeah, go for it.
You grew up poor also, right?
I grew up upper middle class until I was around 13, and then my mom quit her job for reasons, and then we were kind of financially screwed for about 5 years, and then I was financially screwed for about a year, and then I got into streaming very luckily. So I've had my ups and downs.
So the perspective I'm coming at this from is I wrote two books and both of them are kind of about the same thing, which is that the real divide in America is not actually right versus left. It's the class divide. It's about whether you have a college degree or not, and that a lot of factors go into if you have that degree, you're much more likely to be able to achieve the American dream statistically, to be able to become a homeowner, to be able to retire in dignity. Your children will be upwardly mobile. But if you're working class, the way you were for many years, it's much more challenging. I mean, you have a genius for something that's very obvious, but for a lot of people who are doing sort of average jobs that really only need to be done, pretty well, the American dream is increasingly out of reach. So for my second book, I traveled around the country for about a year interviewing working class people from Democrat, Republican, both background, all religious backgrounds, all racial backgrounds, all family, gender, whatever. And what I found was actually very little distinguished working class people who voted for Democrats and working class people who voted for Republicans. And I can tell you a little bit more if it's interesting, like where they sort of, in general, sort of fall on the issues. There's a kind of weird consensus that's happened among people who don't have a college degree. The real polarization is between the elites on both sides. And I think a lot of the conservatives you're talking to are probably in that right wing elite that does get a lot of money and power out of polarization. But when you talk to average Americans, their views on policy, whether they vote for Republicans or Democrats, are very similar. So they're quite, well, left/protectionist on economic stuff. So your average Trump voter would want something like, universal health care, tariffs. They're not against government investment in people who are struggling. What they want really is an economy that supports their labor. But then also the Democrats who are working class want much less immigration. They're very worried about the transgender stuff and the woke stuff. So there's very little that sort of, after I wrote the book, I was sort of joking and I would, say like the first party that gets to, much more access to healthcare and much less immigration is going to get an immediate 60% of the vote because most Democratic working class people and most Republican working class people are there. And it's not just my interviews. I mean, I interviewed hundreds of people, but it's the polling shows that. And so the argument I would make to you is I can show you how when you take the personality of Trump out of it, you just look at the policy agenda and you go like issue by issue. His policy, both what he enacted during his first term and the stuff that he talks about now is where most of those working class people are at. It's actually in that kind of moderate middle. He sounds a lot more like a Democrat from the 90s than he sounds like a Republican from the 2000s or then a Democrat from today sounds like a Democrat from the 90s. So we could go through that. But I think also even at a larger level, I totally respect and understand people who can't get past the character, who can't get past the shit talking, whatever. But I think even this question of whether you're casting your vote based on policy or based on character or sort of high level abstract ideas like democracy. I mean, of course you would say democracy is not an abstract idea, right? But, even that decision, I think at the end of the day, today is going to come down to that class divide and whether an American, a person feels that they have the luxury of saying, I'm going to vote for the person who I feel makes me feel at an abstract level better, or I'm going to vote for the person who's just like, I have this feeling like they're going to be able to get the economy back to where it was in 2019 when working class people saw their first wage increases for the first time in 60 years and inflation was still low.
Sure. So, okay, how to start? There are things that I can kind of agree with, but I would say that these things are meaningless because I would say they're like second or third order. So I would say that like if I was to agree that Americans are having broad agreements around policy, it's only happening because on the first order or on a lower order, what their concept of policy is so far removed from the factual reality of whatever it is we're talking about. That like one of the issues that we're having right now is and I'm going to come back to this a lot, is that the right is involved in so much misinformation. It has destroyed our ability to have policy conversation. We don't do policy in the United States right now on the conservative side. It doesn't exist. And we can get into that